By the time the Council declared Earth defeated, most of the galaxy believed humanity had already passed into history. The war had lasted only 9 cycles, brief by galactic standards, but savage enough to stain trade routes, fracture alliances, and turn half a dozen thriving systems into drifting graveyards of metal and ash. Humanity had fought like a cornered firestorm, wild, brilliant, and ruinously expensive to contain. In the beginning, the elder species had laughed at them. Apes with engines. A young race with too much emotion, too little caution, and a dangerous habit of refusing surrender. By the end, no one laughed. Still, even fire burns out. From the crystal towers of the High Council on Sci-fi Prime, representatives of 200 sovereign worlds watched the final images transmitted from Sol. Earth hung beneath smoke and orbital wreckage, blue seas hidden under storm and soot. The lunar defense rings were shattered. Mars had gone dark 3 days earlier. Every known human dockyard was either destroyed or occupied. The inner system was silent except for debris and the occasional pulse of dying reactors. Supreme Councillor Verex rose before the chamber's star-map dais, his silver ceremonial robes trailing behind him. His voice rolled through the amphitheater and out across every public relay in civilized space. "Let the record show," he said, "that on this day, the species called human has been brought to final ruin. Their homeworld is fallen. Their fleets are broken. Their resistance is ended." The delegates answered with a wave of applause, translated across 100 anatomies into chimes, claws, wing beats, and thunderous stamping. Some celebrated because they had feared humanity. Some because they had hated them. Others because they believed, with sincere relief, that the war was finally over. On the outer edges of the chamber, servants poured dark nectar and opened sealed victory casks that had waited for this moment since the first bombardment of Sol. Music rose from resonance pillars. Banners of coalition worlds shimmered into the air as living holograms. But far from Sci-fi Prime, in the cold remains of the Sol exclusion zone, something still moved. Commander Elias Ward stood on the shattered command deck of the UNS Resolute, staring at a wall of cracked displays and dead panels. Emergency lights painted the survivors in pulses of red. Around him, engineers worked in silence, faces hollow with exhaustion. Blood floated in beads where the gravity plates still flickered. The ship had lost half its spine, 3/4 of its weapons, and every escort assigned to it. Yet it remained. "We have the relay," Lieutenant Sanar Ilian said, her voice rough. "One burst only. After that, they'll trace us." Ward looked at the single surviving star chart. At Earth. At the fleet markers that had vanished one by one over the past 70 hours. At the impossible coordinates blinking beyond the heliopause. He swallowed. "Send it." Sanar hesitated. "Sir, if they're gone." "They're not gone," Ward said, though he had no proof, only faith sharpened into defiance. "Send it." Across the black between stars, a final human transmission screamed into the dark. "Sol has fallen. Execute return protocol." Then the Resolute killed every signature and drifted among the dead. Back in the council chamber, the celebration deepened. No one noticed the long-range warning stations failing one by one at the edge of monitored space. No one saw the first distortion gather over the black. And no one, not yet, understood that Earth's silence had never been the end. It had only been the signal. The feast began before the echoes of the surrender proclamation had faded. Above the grand chamber of Sci-fi Prime, the vaulted ceiling shifted into a living mural of conquest. Constellations rearranged themselves to display the coalition advance through human space. The burning of outposts, the collapse of orbital platforms, the slow tightening around Sol like an iron snare. Delegates lifted their cups beneath the illusion, basking in the glow of what they believed was history completed. Servitors moved in glittering lines between the tiers, balancing silver trays piled with delicacies from every corner of known space. There were crystal eels steeped in sweet vapor, ember fruit split open to release fragrant steam, and the pale marrow of ocean beasts harvested from the moons of Tyser. Music resonated from the chamber walls, tuned to species across 3 atmospheres and 9 hearing ranges. For once, the council was united. At the center of it all stood Supreme Counselor Verex, receiving praise as though he had personally dragged humanity to extinction. "You have preserved civilization," said Minister Holm of the Marathai Combine, raising 4 jeweled hands in salute. "You have ended the predator race," hissed Speaker Jevra, her scaled throat pulsing with satisfaction. Verex accepted each tribute with grave ceremony, but his eyes remained fixed on the great holographic display above the chamber floor. Sol still burned at its center, marked in red. Around it drifted the last known debris fields of the human defense. No fleet signatures. No active stations. No movement. Defeated, he told himself. And yet something in the silence bothered him. Humanity had never met collapse quietly. Every retreat had concealed a trap. Every shattered colony had found some way to bleed its conquerors before dying. Even in the final hours above Earth, human captains had rammed cruisers into carriers, overloaded reactors at point-blank range, and turned civilian tugs into makeshift missiles. They were irrational, undisciplined, and catastrophically inventive. A species like that should have died screaming. Instead, Sol had gone still. At the edge of the feast, beneath the balcony reserved for military observers, Strategos Kell of the Coalition Navy watched the celebration with growing unease. Unlike the politicians, he had fought the humans directly. He had seen what they did when cornered. More importantly, he had studied what they did before they struck. He stepped toward one of the tactical attendants. "Update long-range scans from the Perseus monitoring line." The attendant's feelers twitched as he checked the data lattice. "No update. Strategos. Relay silence from 3 stations." Kell frowned. 3. "Likely residual interference from the war," the attendant said quickly. "The systems are strained." Kell did not answer. He turned his gaze toward the star map. The Perseus line sat nowhere near Sol. There should have been no interference there. Across the chamber, Verex lifted his cup for the final ceremonial toast. The room dimmed. Music softened. 200 species turned their eyes toward the dais. "Let this night be remembered," Verex declared, voice carrying to every relay in the chamber, as the night order triumphed over chaos. The night the galaxy proved that no world, no matter how fierce, can defy the will of the many. A roar of approval swept upward. And then the mural overhead flickered. The hologram trembled, stars blurring for a fraction of a second. Delegates muttered in irritation. Technical attendants rushed to stabilize the projection. One by one, bright markers began appearing at the far edge of the map, beyond the expected lanes, beyond the patrol cordons, deep in regions written off as empty dark. At first, the attendants assumed it was error. Then the markers multiplied. Rows of them. Hundreds. A chill passed through Strategos Kell. He stepped forward, voice suddenly sharp. "Magnify those returns." The display obeyed. The chamber fell silent. Each contact burned with the same transponder code, buried for years in Coalition archives under a classification every officer knew by heart. Terran Deep Fleet Command. The cup slipped from Verex's hand and shattered on the stone. Far away, beyond every border the Council had believed secure, the void was opening, and something vast was coming home. For 3 full breaths, no one in the grand chamber moved. The shattered fragments of Verex's ceremonial cup glittered across the black stone floor. The music had died. The resonance pillars were mute. Delegates who had been laughing moments earlier now stood frozen beneath the trembling star map, their faces, scales, mandibles, and sensory fronds turned upward in disbelief. The markers kept appearing. Not dozens. Not hundreds. Thousands. They spilled across the outer edge of the display in tight geometric formations, each one tagged with the same impossible designation. Terran Deep Fleet Command. A name out of rumor, out of classified briefings, out of failed intelligence reports dismissed years ago as fear-fed speculation. Strategos Kell was the first to recover. "Seal the chamber," he barked. "Cut public relay transmission. Military channel priority now." At once, the chamber doors thundered shut. The hovering record drones blinked red as feeds to the civilian networks were severed. Panic rose anyway, immediate and contagious. Delegates began shouting over one another in a chaos of translated speech. That fleet was destroyed. No human force of that size was ever recorded. Those transponders must be false. Where are they coming from? Kell ignored them. He strode to the tactical dais, forcing attendants aside with such force that one nearly fell from the platform. Range. A trembling technician bent over the console. Estimating. Impossible. No revising. His voice cracked. They are emerging from dark space insertion vectors outside the monitored rim corridor. Verex descended from the central podium, all ceremony stripped from him now. How far? The technician swallowed. Too close. That answer spread a deeper silence than the shouting had. Above them, the display changed again. The contacts sharpened from abstract lights into layered formations. Battle carriers at the center, surrounded by heavy cruisers, destroyer screens, drone tenders, logistics hulls, and something larger. Vast signatures like moving continents, each one radiating output on a scale no modern fleet should have possessed. Human ships, but not like the desperate patchwork warcraft seen over Sol. These were clean-lined, heavily armored, built for distance and endurance. Built in secret. Built for return. Kell stared upward, mind racing through old intelligence fragments. Colony disappearances beyond the mapped frontier. Resource convoys lost without distress calls. Listening posts that went dark and were blamed on pirates or stellar drift. Human long-range expeditions the Council had mocked as fantasy because no species, not even the machine-born, could sustain fleets that far from established gates. No species except one that expected to fight alone. How long until they reach core lanes? Verex asked. Hours, the technician whispered. A murmur of horror swept the room. Supreme Counselor Verex turned, not to the military officers, but to the intelligence ministers. Why was I never informed this was possible? One of them, pale and trembling, managed a reply. Because our models said no civilization would exile that much of its strength beyond known space. It would cripple their economy, fracture command, invite invasion. It did invite invasion, Kell snapped. That may have been the point. The realization landed like a weapon strike. Humanity had known. Known Earth could fall. Known Sol could be surrounded. Known the Council would commit everything to a fast, public execution. And somewhere beyond the edge of civilization, while the galaxy watched the homeworld burn, another human force had waited in the dark. Silent, hidden, untouched. On the tactical display, one signal broke formation and surged ahead of the others. A transmission beacon. Broadband. Unencrypted. The chamber speakers came alive with static. Then a voice spoke, calm, human, and carrying the weight of absolute certainty. This is Grand Admiral Saria Vale of Terran Deep Fleet Command to the assembled powers of the Galactic Council. No one in the chamber breathed. You were so eager to witness humanity's end, she said, that you never asked why Earth stopped calling for help. The star map bloomed wider still as more signatures emerged behind her vanguard, rank after rank without visible end. When Sol went silent, Vale continued, that was not our death cry. Her next words fell into the chamber like judgment. It was our recall order. And across the galaxy, in military stations, trade ports, border fortresses, and worlds that had spent the evening celebrating, alarm sirens began to scream. The first world to see them was not a fortress, nor a capital, nor even a military staging ground. It was Halcyon Verge, a trade nexus on the edge of Coalition territory, famous for its glass-ring docks and markets that never slept. Its defense grid was ceremonial at best. No one expected war to come there. Not after Sol. Not after the Council's declaration. The local governor had spent the evening under lantern light on a balcony of polished jade, offering toasts to peace restored. Then the stars above the station split open. Witnesses would later describe it in different ways. Some said the void cracked like black ice. Others swore the heavens folded inward, as if reality itself had become a curtain drawn back by unseen hands. Across the upper atmosphere, dark apertures bloomed in perfect formation, each one rimmed with cold blue distortion. And from them came the human fleet. They emerged in silence. No wild firing. No dramatic broadcast. Just the impossible mass of warships pouring out of dark space with terrible precision, their hulls catching the light of Halcyon's sun like blades drawn from deep water. Battle carriers the size of districts. Cruisers layered in armor dark as burnished iron. Spearhead destroyers descending in exact lines, too disciplined to be mistaken for raiders or survivors. This was not a remnant. This was an answer. On Serakai Prime, the Council watched the live feed in paralyzed disbelief. The projection filled the grand chamber from floor to ceiling. Delegates who had celebrated Earth's fall only an hour earlier now stared upward at a sky that no longer belonged to them. Strategos Kell's voice cut through the silence. Signal local defense. Do not engage unless fired upon. Several ministers spun toward him in outrage. Not engage, one shouted. They've invaded Coalition space. Kell did not take his eyes off the display. If that force wished Halcyon destroyed, you would already be watching debris. He was right. The human fleet moved around the world and stationed with impossible control. Assault vectors formed, then halted. Targeting webs appeared on Coalition sensors. Every defense cannon, every patrol corvette, every command relay, every shield node caught and held in perfect firing solutions. Humanity had drawn a blade across the galaxy's throat. And waited. Then the broadcasts began. Every screen on Halcyon Verge, public terminals, ship bridges, private homes, cargo bay monitors, even children's lesson walls, went black. A single insignia burned into view, the old Terran crest, cracked by a line through Sol and reforged around a ring of stars. Grand Admiral Saria Vale appeared a moment later. She wore no ornament, no medals beyond service iron, no expression beyond a cold and measured fury. Behind her stretched the bridge of a warship vast enough to humble dreadnought doctrine. Citizens of the Coalition, she said, and her voice spread across worlds, fleets, and frightened chambers. You were told humanity had fallen. You were told Earth's silence meant surrender. You were told the war was finished. She paused as, behind her, more ships emerged in endless files. You were lied to. On Halcyon's surface, crowds flooded into the streets, staring upward as the fleet blotted out sections of the sky. Dockworkers dropped tools. Traders abandoned stalls. Children pointed at descending lights that never struck, never burned, only hovered in perfect dominance. At the council, Verex found his voice at last. "Open a channel," he said hoarsely. "Now." The link connected. For the first time, the ruler of the Galactic Council stood face to face with a woman who had come out of the dark. "Admiral," Verex began, struggling to recover the dignity of office, "if your purpose is negotiation, then—" Vale cut him off. "My purpose is correction." She leaned slightly forward, and the chamber audio sharpened with her next words. "You mistook our grief for weakness. You mistook our silence for death. You mistook Earth for all of humanity." Behind her, the tactical display lit with fresh jumps across coalition territory. Not one fleet. Many. The delegates gasped. The Deep Fleet had not broken one sky. It had broken all of them. Panic spread faster than light ever could. In the first minutes after the human fleet emerged, the coalition still clung to denial. Emergency councils formed. Admirals shouted across encrypted channels. Border commands demanded confirmation, then demanded corrections when the confirmations came back worse than the rumors. What they had first marked as a single Terran incursion became 10, then 40, then more than 100 simultaneous emergence points across coalition space. Human ships were everywhere, not striking at random, but arriving with terrifying purpose. Shipyards were boxed in before their crews could launch. Relay nexuses were pinned beneath precision targeting grids. Military stockpiles, gate controls, and command stations all found themselves staring down fleets that had somehow known exactly where to appear. On Serakai Prime, the Grand Chamber had become a war room in all but name. The feast tables stood abandoned, their silver platters and jeweled cups forgotten beneath tactical projections and casualty estimates. The sweet perfumes of celebration had curdled into the hot metallic scent of fear. Supreme Counselor Verex stood at the center of the chamber, rigid as carved stone, while Strategos Kell read the incoming reports. "Halcyon Verge secured without planetary bombardment," Kell said. "Local defense disarmed. Human Marines have seized relay control." A second officer stepped forward. "The Tyser ship forges are surrounded. Their garrison surrendered after Terran destroyers disabled orbital command." Another voice cut in. "The Veldran Gate lattice is offline. Human forces are allowing civilian traffic to withdraw, but have locked all coalition military movement." One report after another. System after system. Not destruction. Domination. That, more than anything, broke the Chamber's resolve. Many of the coalition worlds had expected barbarism from humanity, a revenge frenzy, fire from the heavens, the sort of blood answer they themselves might have delivered after seeing a homeworld burn. Instead, the Terrans moved with cold discipline. They struck only military infrastructure. They isolated leadership. They severed response lines. They made it unmistakably clear that they could kill millions, and were choosing not to. Verex finally turned toward the projection of Grand Admiral Saria Vale, whose image still waited across the chamber link like a blade held at the throat but not yet pressed in. "What do you want?" he asked. For the first time, something shifted in Vale's expression. Not mercy, not triumph. Something older, heavier. "Want," she repeated. "You still believe this is about want?" Behind her, officers moved across the bridge of her flagship with silent efficiency. Star maps flashed red across entire sectors of coalition space. "You came to Sol with extermination doctrine," Vale said. "You shattered orbital hospitals. You burned refugee lanes. You named our extinction a condition of peace. And then, before our dead were even counted, you raised cups to celebrate. No one answered. In every hall of power across the coalition, the same silence fell. Vale continued, voice low and steady. We did not cross the dark to become you. We crossed it so you would understand exactly what you created. She gestured, and the tactical feed changed. Now the chamber saw Earth, not the broken images from the Council's victory broadcast, but fresh live views from hidden surviving satellites. The planet still turned beneath a haze of fire and storm. Ruined orbital rings drifted like shattered crowns. Continents flickered with scattered emergency lights where cities had once blazed. A graveyard, and still alive. A murmur rippled through the delegates. Earth endures, Vale said. So does Mars. So do colonies you marked as extinguished. Humanity is wounded. Humanity is furious. But humanity remains. Kell stared at the display, understanding before the others did. This isn't an invasion, he said quietly. Vale's eyes found his. No, it's a surrender ceremony. Those words hit harder than any weapon. Across coalition space, human fleets tightened their formations. Gun lines aligned with capitals. Carrier groups settled over fortress moons. Boarding craft waited in launch cradles, still undropped. The stars themselves seemed to hold their breath. Then Grand Admiral Vale gave the galaxy a choice. Kneel, she said, and answer for Earth. And for the first time in living memory, the Council of Worlds had nothing left to say.